you have a Conservative Party that will never say boo to Israel. In other words, boo to the cult. You've got a Liberal Democratic Party, which is, of course, neither liberal nor democratic, ironically, which will never say boo to Israel. You had the whole of the Blairite wing of the Labour Party, who would never say boo to Israel. In fact, you'd never get a bigger supporter of Israel than Tony Blair. But you had a few people, or a group around Corbyn, initially, who will criticise Israel for its abominations in terms of treatment of Palestinians. Because you can be racist against Palestinians; it doesn't matter at all. You never get a comeback for that. And so they wanted to mop up that. And so you had this hysteria about anti-Semitism in the Labour Party to get the Labour Party on its knees to complete the set, basically. And so now we have a situation where any criticism of Israel by anyone in the Labour Party is basically an expulsion. And you know, my son's, we've got a new media platform called Icke, which we've just started. And my son's interviewed a Labour activist on that about a week ago, who is a supporter of some of the stuff that I say, and he pointed out that just sharing my information now is a suspendable offence in the Labour Party. And I'll just give you one example of how ludicrous it's become, and an example of what I said earlier, that if you're Jewish and you criticize Israel, you get the treatment far worse than a non-Jewish person, for reasons I'm explaining, the cult. There's a guy called Chilson. He was born in Israel. He served as a conscript, as they do, in the Israel Defense Forces. And then stayed on and did, I think, some PR work, taking journalists around, showing them places that the government wants them to see. He served in a war in Lebanon in 1982, and then the pennies dropped of what was going on in terms of treatment of Palestinians and all of it. And he moved to Britain, and he's thinking, how do I, what vehicle can I have? I think he's at Oxford University, I recall. What vehicle do I have that I can express, my feelings about what's going on there? And he thought, well, the Labour Party. He's been expelled from the Labour Party for being an anti-Semite. He's a Jewish guy whose relatives were in Germany at the wrong time. This is how ludicrous it's become. Because it's not about protecting Jewish people from discrimination. It's about this protection racket, to protect the cult and its agenda. And to protect the cult's agenda, in many ways, more than anyone else, from Jewish people realizing how their community has been hijacked by this cult.
I don't know what is a bigger myth, that bin Laden was behind 9/11, or Prince Andrew doesn't sweat, doesn't do PDAs, doesn't go out dressed casually in London. Just jumping back to what we talked about earlier then.
I can give you a quick one on that.
Yeah, go for it.
Robert Mueller, Russiagate and all that stuff. He was actually appointed head of the FBI 2 weeks before 9/11, right? Which I feel it in me water wasn't a coincidence. Anyway, he actually said, as head of the FBI, that there was not enough evidence for the 19 hijackers to being responsible to put it in a court of law, and that there wasn't enough evidence for bin Laden, right? And when I started investigating 9/11, which was basically from the day, one of the people I was in correspondence with for a book called Alice in Wonderland of the World Trade Center Disaster, came out in 2002, was a guy, the strange name of Rex Toom. Rex Toom. And we corresponded a bit when I was asking questions because he was a spokesman for the FBI. And someone else, more recently, a few years ago now, asked Rex Toom on behalf of the FBI why on their page about bin Laden, most wanted terrorist, was his list of crimes, or did his list of crimes not include 9/11? And Rex Toom, on behalf of the FBI, said because there's not enough hard evidence that he was involved. So, manipulators have known since Noah was a lad that, or is that anti-Semitic? I don't know. It was just an historical character that came into my mind. Let's say Plato was a lad then. That if you keep repeating a lie, eventually it becomes truth. And this is how they work. And the media, of course, which is ultimately owned by this cult, if you go deep enough, they play the game of repeating untruths till they become an everyone knows that, mate. And so what they've done with 9/11 is just keep repeating untruths, and it just becomes, in the perception of not everybody, there's a lot of skepticism, but a lot of people, that's how it was. It wasn't like that at all.
So Russia invades Afghanistan. Russia leaves Afghanistan. The Mujahideen are fighting. They're backed by the CIA and the Americans. So the story is then, the plot is that bin Laden then turns his sights on the West and on the Americans, generating this hatred that culminates with 9/11. What's your response to that?
Well, it's a load of old crap. I mean, Zbigniew Brzezinski, who was Jimmy Carter's national security advisor when Carter was president, he admitted to a French news magazine some years after he was with Carter that they had systematically manipulated the Soviet Union to invade Afghanistan. And they, in his words, they wanted to give the Soviet Union their Vietnam. Because although people that invade Afghanistan cause a lot of death and destruction, they never win. It's basically a place where you can't win. You just keep on fighting, knowing that there's no end in sight. It's what's happening to the Americans now. So at that time, the government in Kabul, the capital, was a Soviet satellite government. So to draw the Soviet Union in, they wanted to put that Kabul government in danger of being overthrown. So they created the Mujahideen and funded them, and they wanted a frontman who would be the kind of focal point of the resistance to the Soviets. And it was Osama bin Laden from this big-time Bush family-connected bin Laden family in Saudi Arabia. And he's the good guy then. Oh, that Osama bin Laden, he's lovely, he is. He's fighting the Soviets. He believes in democracy. Comes from Saudi Arabia. Anyway, and then the Soviets left, leaving a million dead Afghans behind. And then there was this morphing where Robin Cook, who at one point was foreign secretary in the Labour government, and to his eternal credit, resigned from office. He was in a different government position then, over the invasion of Iraq. He, after he'd stepped down as a minister, etc., he said, I think it was in The Guardian, that Al-Qaeda means the base or the database because the people that were the, if you like, members of Al-Qaeda were basically the same people on the CIA database of Mujahideen fighters who fought the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan. So what happened was that the Mujahideen, oh, they're the good guys, they're fighting for freedom, suddenly became Al-Qaeda. Same people, only this time the scripts changed and the shows changed, the vaudevilles changed. Now they're the bad people, right? So now we have an excuse to do things because we're fighting the bad people that we wouldn't before. You know, if you want to go into a country and you don't have an excuse, then say there's a terrorist group there that's a threat to America or a threat to the world, and you're in. This is how it works.